Welcome to the Flat Track Factory. We're back with Dave Durrell of Durrell Racing Products to talk some more about suspension and chassis setups. Dave, welcome to the Flat Track Factory.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Yeah. Pleasure to have you. Lots of questions that my viewers have had about chassis and suspension setups that I don't really think that I can answer as well. If I got those kind of questions, I would go to a guy like you. So we got the guy. So thanks for coming. We were talking off camera a little bit about, there's so much to talk about, you know, where do we even start? So maybe could you just talk about the basics of chassis setup, about how you get started with a bike?
It's a broad question, of course, and there's a lot that goes into really determining, the overall chassis setup. And in the big picture, there's kind of your baseline setup, but all of that in dirt track all needs to be manipulated depending on the track and the track surfaces and the traction level, the radiuses of the corners, the banking of the track. I mean, all those are variables. And then obviously, as you start out a track, it may be dry to start with, and here certainly as the time comes along, moisture comes out, it becomes usually more tacky, but it can also become more wet slick. But as you know in dirt track, the track conditions are constantly changing, and then you always have to be paying attention to that and knowing where the track is going, and what changes you need to make before that main event.
Yeah, and even someone with your experience and skill level, when you come to a new area like this, you're learning still.
Yep, absolutely. You're always learning every time, and you're always just trying to figure out what's the best setup, what's gonna work the best, and how am I gonna get around that corner the fastest. That's what it boils down to.
What are we looking at from the suspension setup baseline when you're like maybe somebody was just starting out and coming to the track and they have a dirt bike, for example, and want to convert it over? Where do we start, or where do you start?
Well, yeah, if you're like like most people ride now, or ride the motocross bike, so we'll do the DTX, what we call DTX conversion. So it's the motocross bikes to a flat track, dirt track, setup. So that entails lowering the suspension, changing the spring rates and valving, and that's all set to the rider's height and weight. And then on those bikes too, I also go by inseam length, because you want the bike to be able to fit them properly. You don't want them, some guys might be especially adults, if they're 6 foot tall, well, they may have really short legs and a long torso. Well, you don't want to set a bike up that's real tall for a 6 foot normal 6 foot tall guy, because then his legs won't touch the ground, and vice versa, And so,
When do you think you and I are going to grow up?
I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't.
Okay.
Too late.
This is it, huh?
Yeah.
Well, the good thing is when we stand next to each other, we look normal.
Yeah, we're average.
Yeah.
I don't know the rest of you.
We're average flat track racers.
Yep. Yeah. So all of my setups for that applications are really tuned to the rider. So everyone is different. There's no baseline. This is what you got to run. I don't care. I don't care that you're 5 foot tall. I'm not going to give you a suspension on a bike that's makes you to where you can't touch the ground or feel uncomfortable or be so tall on the bike that you can't ride it, just because I think that's where the chassis needs to be. There's definitely a range of area that the chassis can be in and still work really good.
And generally speaking, from the motocross setup, the bike would need to be lower and stiffer. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. Yeah. Motocross is tall and soft for absorbing big, huge bumps. Well, we don't have that on a flat track. Not most of the time.
If things are going well, we don't have that.
Yeah, if everything's good. So most tracks are relatively smooth. I mean, there's obviously going to be your ruts and potholes and things like that, but not anything that needs 12 inches of suspension. So basically, it's reduced by a third to a half, kind of in that range of travel, and then just bikes are just set to the individual rider. So spring rates are set to the rider themselves, as far obviously body weight, but also how they ride. If they're a real aggressive rider, they're going to need a stiffer spring. If you're more a rider with more finesse and just a smoother rider, gentle on the throttle, those guys can get away with softer spring rates.
So generally, the spring rate tracks with the lap time. So the faster the lap time, the stiffer the spring rate.
Yeah, yeah.
Generally speaking,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
So maybe if you got on your buddy who rides in the Open Pro class and you're just starting out, the bike would feel excessively stiff to you.
Right.
Just because you're not loading it enough. So
Right.
that's why somebody like you needs to be involved to talk to the rider about their experience and what classes they're riding to get a better setup.
Yeah. Yeah, and it works that way with motocross and off-road racers too. If you're a AA guy, pro rider, you need stiffer suspension because you're hitting that stuff at a whole lot faster speed than somebody else that's a B or C rider. And so a B and C rider is going to need something that's going to be a lot more supple, a lot more softer, to absorb the stuff because they're just not hitting it at the speed, a AA rider would be.
Let's preview some of the questions that I get that I really don't know how to answer. I often get, hey, what is the wheelbase of your framer? And should I build my conversion of a street bike into that number? And then I say, I don't really think you should do that necessarily. I come and measure the wheelbase of my dirt bike, and what are they, like 4 or 5 inches longer than a frame flat tracker? And they go just as fast.
Well, they are in stock form.
Okay.
But once you lower them down, everything
gets shorter.
gets shorter.
The wheelbase gets shorter because the suspension comes up, forks go back.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's like a plus or minus because you got obviously the forks that are coming back at an angle. So that's coming shorter. But now you got the swing arm that's normally down here on a motocrosser. Now it's coming up here. Well, now it's a little bit longer, a little bit. Personally, I'm not a big guy on wheelbase. Certainly dealing with the DTX bikes, you're limited on a slot that you can work with. That doesn't make or break your chassis setup. There's so much more going on with ride heights and offsets and rake and trail and everything else that can really make a change. Moving, running the wheel forward or back in the adjustment range that we have on the DTX bikes doesn't mean anything. So
and then lots of other fun questions that we'll be able to get to. We'll probably talk about rim widths. All the different rim widths you'll notice on a frame flat track bike. They're sometimes wider, and on a DTX bike, aren't they sometimes normally a little narrower?
A little bit narrower, yeah.
So we can talk about maybe why that is. There's so many fun things to come up with that we can talk about. Again, this is a prime time for all those questions that you all have had for me. Put those down in the comments. Davey's here now and willing to talk to us about that. So please do that. About now, YouTube's going to pop up the little subscribe button. Hit that so when these videos come out with Dave to talk to you about this, you'll get notified of them. Click the notification bell. Click the like button. A little channel, Flat Track's lost in a sea of all kinds of other stuff. So hit that and we can help grow the sport. Dave, thank you so very much.
All right.
Look forward to having you and we can really dive into this.
Yep, we'll talk more.
Thanks for watching.